My DIL said I should just disappear, so I made her disappear instead. Part 1. In sun-baked Tucson, a 73-year-old widow was about to teach her daughter-in-law a lesson that would change their family forever. What began as a peaceful retirement took a devastating turn when Eleanor Sullivan overheard words that sliced through her heart like a desert rattlesnake's bite. After years of trying to be the perfect mother-in-law, she was about to discover exactly how far she would go to reclaim her dignity and her son. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Eleanor Sullivan wasn't your typical soft-spoken grandmother, waiting patiently for occasional visits. For over 30 years, she had been the backbone of her family, financial supporter during hard times, childcare provider, holiday host, and emotional sanctuary. Known for her unwavering support and quiet strength. When she encountered those poisonous words, "I wish she would just disappear," she had no idea she was walking into a moment that would transform everything. Eleanor picked up her phone to call her attorney that afternoon. That call would lead to the most powerful wake-up call her daughter-in-law would ever receive. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Sonoran sun had barely crested the mountains when Eleanor Sullivan opened her eyes on a Tuesday morning in April. 73 years on this earth, and still the desert sunrise never failed to take her breath away. She lay still for a moment. In her queen-sized bed, the emptiness beside her still strange even after 6 years without William. Through the open window, she could hear the distant cooing of morning doves, the soft rustle of palm fronds in the morning breeze, and the faint hum of early traffic on Speedway Boulevard. Her joints protested as she swung her legs over the side of the bed, feet finding the cool Mexican tile that she and William had installed together when they'd bought this house 38 years ago. Back when Thomas was just a boy running around with skin knees and big dreams. Back when this house echoed with laughter and possibility. The house held their history in every corner. The small chip in the kitchen counter from when Thomas had tried to open a soda bottle against the edge despite her warnings. The height markings on the doorframe of the pantry, tracking Thomas's growth from a small boy to the tall, handsome man he'd become. The study where William had built his architectural models, now converted into Eleanor's reading room, still containing the drafting table where he'd designed some of Tucson's most beautiful buildings. Eleanor made her way to the kitchen, the routine as familiar as her own reflection. Coffee first. Always coffee first. As the machine gurgled to life, she reached for her phone to check the time. 6:15 a.m. She had plenty of time to prepare for her weekly lunch with Thomas. These Tuesday lunches had become their tradition after William passed away. Thomas would take an extended break from his dental practice, and they would meet at a small Mexican restaurant halfway between his office and her house. Sometimes they'd talk about William, about the memories that still brought both comfort and pain. Other times they'd discuss Thomas's practice, Eleanor's volunteer work at the library, or the latest books they'd read. It was their time, sacred and protected from the busy demands of daily life. The coffee's rich aroma filled the kitchen as Eleanor stepped outside to check on her garden. The April morning carried just enough chill to make her wrap her robe tighter around her slender frame. Her desert garden was her pride, a carefully curated collection of native plants that thrived in the harsh Arizona climate. Prickly pear. Cacti, their paddle-shaped pads dotted with bright yellow blooms. Ocotillo with its spindly arms reaching skyward, crowned with fiery red flowers. And her pride and joy, the night-blooming cereus that William had called our miracle, because it bloomed for just one night each year, its fragrant white flowers unfurling under the desert moon before disappearing with the dawn. Another beautiful day, she whispered to the garden, the words carrying a contentment that had taken years to cultivate after William's death. Grief, she had learned, was like the desert itself, seemingly barren at first glance but actually teeming with life. Just beneath the surface. It never truly vanished, you simply learned to live alongside it. Back inside, Eleanor prepared a simple breakfast, whole grain toast, a small bowl of yogurt with berries, a glass of orange juice. She'd become more conscious of her health in recent years, determined to remain independent for as long as possible. Thomas worried about her living alone, but Eleanor treasured her independence. This house was her sanctuary, filled with memories of the life she and William had built together. As she ate, Eleanor mentally planned her day. Lunch with Thomas at 12:30. Before that, she would drop off books at the library where she volunteered 3 days a week. After lunch, perhaps she would work on the quilt she was making for her granddaughter Lily's high school graduation. The thought of Lily brought a smile to Eleanor's face. At 17, she was so much like Thomas had been, bright, ambitious, with that same crinkle around the eyes when she laughed. Eleanor's relationship with Lily had always been special. From the moment Thomas and Rebecca had placed the tiny, red-faced newborn in her arms, Eleanor had felt a connection that transcended generations. She had cared for Lily 3 days a week when Rebecca returned to her job as a pharmaceutical sales representative. Those days had been exhausting but precious, singing lullabies, reading stories, watching in wonder as Lily discovered her world. Things had changed when Lily started school and Rebecca's career took off. The 3-day-a-week visits became occasional weekend sleepovers, then holiday gatherings, then increasingly infrequent family dinners. Eleanor understood, families evolved, lives grew busy. She tried not to take it personally when Rebecca began to decline her offers to help with Lily, citing conflicting schedules and activities. Still, Eleanor made sure to attend every school play, every piano recital, every soccer game, sitting quietly in the audience or on the sidelines, her heart swelling with pride. She sent thoughtful birthday and Christmas gifts, remembered small details about Lily's friends and interests, and kept a special drawer in the guest room filled with Lily's favorite snacks for when she visited. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The relationship with Rebecca had always been complicated. Eleanor had tried so hard in those early years, offering help without overstepping, providing advice only when asked, biting her tongue when she disagreed with parenting decisions that weren't hers to make. William had often teased her about her diplomat skills, saying she could teach courses at the State Department on mother-in-law diplomacy. After William died, something subtle shifted. Rebecca became more distant, her smiles more forced, her excuses for cancelled family dinners more frequent. Eleanor had tried to bridge the growing gap, inviting Rebecca for lunch, offering to help with household tasks when she knew Rebecca was overwhelmed with work, sending thoughtful text messages just to check in. But the responses grew shorter, the cancellations more common. "She's just busy," Thomas would say, a slight furrow between his brows betraying his concern. "Her job is demanding, and she's up for a promotion. It's not personal, Mom." But it felt personal. Especially when Eleanor noticed how Rebecca would stiffen when she hugged her, or how her suggestions for Lily's college applications were politely acknowledged then summarily ignored. Still, Eleanor persisted in her efforts, determined to maintain family harmony for Thomas's sake. For Lily's sake. For the memory of the family she and William had dreamed their son would have. Eleanor finished her breakfast and dressed for the day, choosing a light blue blouse that William had always said matched her eyes, a pair of comfortable slacks, and her silver hoop earrings, a gift from Thomas last Christmas. She applied a light touch of makeup, brushed her silver hair into its usual neat bob, and added a small spritz of the jasmine perfume that had been her signature scent for decades. At 10:30, she gathered the library books she needed to return and headed out to her car, a sensible Honda Civic that William had insisted on buying just before his heart attack, saying he wanted to make sure she had reliable transportation, just in case. As if he had somehow known he wouldn't be around much longer. The Tucson Public Library welcomed her with the familiar hush that had always felt like a gentle embrace. Eleanor loved her volunteer work here, helping to organize community events, assisting with the children's reading program, and occasionally covering the front desk when they were short-staffed. At 73, she was still sharp, still capable, still eager to contribute. "Morning, Eleanor," called Marjorie, the head librarian who had become a close friend over the years. "How are you today?" "Just fine," Eleanor replied, setting her returned books on the counter. "Looking forward to lunch with Thomas. How was your weekend?" As they chatted about Marjorie's new grandson and the upcoming book fair, Eleanor felt a familiar sense of belonging. Here, at least, she was valued, needed, seen. She left the library at 11:45, giving herself plenty of time to drive to Casa Maria, the small family-owned restaurant where she and Thomas had been meeting for lunch nearly every Tuesday for 6 years. The hostess, Maria, greeted her by name and led her to their usual table by the window. "Thomas not with you today?" Maria asked, setting down 2 menus. "He'll be here soon," Eleanor assured her. "I'm a little early." She ordered iced tea and settled in to wait, watching the door for Thomas's tall frame to appear. At 12:40, when he still hadn't arrived, she sent a text message. "At Casa Maria. Everything okay?" The response came quickly. "So sorry, Mom. Emergency patient. Root canal. Can we reschedule?" Disappointment settled in her chest, but Eleanor pushed it aside. Emergencies happened, especially in Thomas's profession. She knew he would never cancel their standing lunch date without good reason. Of course, she texted back. "Tomorrow instead?" "Can't tomorrow. Lunch meeting with dental supplier. Thursday?" "Thursday works. 12:30 again?" "Perfect. Sorry again." Love you. Eleanor put her phone away and signaled to Maria. Just me today after all. I'll have the small chicken enchilada. As she ate her solitary lunch, Eleanor tried to ignore the hollow feeling in her chest. It was just one lunch. They would reschedule. Thomas was busy, successful, had responsibilities. She shouldn't feel this disproportionate sense of loss over a missed meal. But it wasn't just the lunch, was it? It was the gradual erosion of her place in her son's life. The increasing frequency of cancellations. The way holidays had become negotiations rather than celebrations. The feeling that she was an obligation rather than a joy. Eleanor paid her bill, leaving Maria an extra generous tip to compensate for taking up the table alone, and headed back to her car. She would stop by Thomas's office on the way home, she decided. Just a quick hello. Maybe drop off some of those peanut butter cookies he loved so much from the batch she'd made yesterday. Emergency root canals were stressful, he'd appreciate the gesture. Thomas's dental practice was located in a modern medical complex on the east side of town. Eleanor parked her Honda and made her way to the second-floor suite, the small container of cookies tucked in her purse. The reception area was quiet when she entered, the young woman behind the desk, Ashley, according to her nameplate, looking up with a professional smile. Good afternoon. Do you have an appointment? No, Thomas's mother, Eleanor Sullivan. I was just in the area and thought I'd drop something off for him. She patted her purse. Homemade cookies. His favorite. Ashley's smile faltered slightly. Oh, Dr. Sullivan isn't in today. He took a personal day. Eleanor felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. A personal day? There's no emergency root canal? No, ma'am. The schedule was clear enough that he felt comfortable taking the day off. Would you like me to give him a message when he returns tomorrow? Eleanor forced her face to remain neutral, years of social training preventing her from revealing the shock and hurt coursing through her. No, thank you. No message. I must have misunderstood. She turned and walked out of the office, her steps measured, her back straight. Only when she reached the privacy of her car did she allow the tears to come. Thomas had lied to her. For the first time in their relationship, her son had deliberately lied about something as simple as their weekly lunch. Why? What could possibly be so important that he couldn't just tell her the truth? Was he ashamed of spending time with her? Was their lunch date such a burden that he needed to manufacture an emergency to escape it? Eleanor dried her eyes, took several deep breaths, and started her car. She would go home. She would think this through rationally. There must be an explanation. Thomas wasn't a liar by nature. Something must be wrong. The drive home passed in a blur, her mind racing with possibilities. Perhaps he had a doctor's appointment he didn't want to worry her about. Perhaps he and Rebecca were having marriage troubles. Perhaps Eleanor pulled into her driveway, noticing with surprise that there was already a car parked there. Rebecca's sleek black BMW. What was Rebecca doing at her house in the middle of a workday? Eleanor parked beside the BMW and approached her front door with caution. The sound of voices drifted through the partially open window, Rebecca's and, yes, Thomas's. They were inside her house, apparently unaware that she might return home early from her lunch that never happened. Just don't understand why we have to keep doing this every Tuesday, Rebecca was saying, her voice carrying that edge of frustration that Eleanor had come to recognize over the years. It's not like she doesn't see you at other times. Mom looks forward to our lunches, Thomas replied, his voice tired as if this were a well-worn argument. It's only an hour a week, Rebecca. After everything she's done for us, for you, Rebecca corrected. Everything she's done for you. And yes, she was a good mother. No one's denying that. But you're a grown man with your own family now. Your own responsibilities. You can't keep letting her guilt you into these obligations. Eleanor froze on her own front porch, hand halfway to the door. Guilt? Obligation? Was that how Thomas saw their lunches? She doesn't guilt me, Thomas protested, but his voice lacked conviction. And it's not an obligation. She's my mother. And I'm your wife, Rebecca countered. And Lily is your daughter. We're your immediate family now, Thomas. Eleanor had her time. She raised you. She had her life with your father. Now it's our turn. What exactly are you asking me to do? Cut her out of our lives completely? There was a pause, and Eleanor held her breath, her heart hammering painfully against her ribs. Sometimes, Rebecca said, her voice lower now but still clear enough to carry through the open window, sometimes I wish she would just disappear. Move to one of those retirement communities in Florida or something. Give us some space to be our own family without her constant presence. Eleanor felt as if she'd been struck. Disappear. Rebecca wanted her to disappear. You don't mean that, Thomas said, but again, his voice lacked the forceful defense Eleanor desperately wanted to hear. Don't I? Think about it, Thomas. Every holiday planned around her preferences. Every family decision considering how Eleanor will feel about it. College tours scheduled so Eleanor can come along. It's suffocating. She's been alone since Dad died, it's been 6 years. And she's not exactly sitting at home pining away. She has her library friends, her garden club, that book group she's always talking about. She has a full life. She doesn't need to be the third wheel in our marriage. Eleanor felt her legs growing weak. She lowered herself to sit on the porch swing, trying to process what she was hearing. After everything, after all the babysitting, the financial help when Thomas was starting his practice, the careful consideration she'd always given to Rebecca's feelings, the times she'd bitten her tongue rather than offer unwanted advice, this was how her daughter-in-law saw her. As an intruder. A burden. Someone to be tolerated rather than loved. I think we should tell her we're cutting back on family dinners, Rebecca continued. And maybe you can make these lunches bi-weekly instead of every week. It's a start. She'll be hurt, Thomas said, and Eleanor could picture the worried furrow between his brows. She'll adjust, Rebecca replied dismissively. She's a grown woman, not a child. And frankly, it's not healthy for her to be this dependent on you. Dependent? Eleanor almost laughed aloud at the absurdity. She had never been dependent on anyone. Since William died. She managed her own finances, maintained her own home, built her own social life. She saw Thomas once a week for lunch and occasionally for family dinners. How was that dependency? I don't think, Thomas began, but Rebecca cut him off. Look, we need to go. I've got a conference call at 2, and you promised to pick up Lily from school today since I'll be late. We can finish this discussion at home. I still need to get Mom's spare key. That's why we came here, remember? Right. To check on that leak under the sink that she mentioned. Where does she keep the spare? In the kitchen drawer next to the fridge. The one with all the takeout menus. Eleanor heard movement inside, footsteps heading toward the kitchen. This was her chance. To retreat, to drive away and pretend she'd never overheard this conversation. She could return later, act surprised to find the leak fixed, never let on that she knew how Rebecca really felt. How Thomas had failed to defend her. But 73 years of life had taught Eleanor Sullivan many things, and chief among them was this: running from painful truths didn't make them any less true. It just gave them power over you. With deliberate movements, she stood from the porch swing, straightened her light blue blouse, and opened her front door. The sudden silence was immediate and profound. Rebecca stood in the entryway between the living room and kitchen, frozen in place, her perfectly made-up face registering shock before quickly composing itself into a polite smile. Thomas emerged from the kitchen, spare key in hand, his expression morphing from surprise to guilt in an instant. "Mom," he exclaimed. "I thought you'd be at lunch." "Clearly," Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "My lunch companion had an emergency root canal, you see. Except, it seems the emergency was coming to my house with his wife to discuss how to tell me I should disappear." The color drained from Thomas's face. "Mom, no, that's not, don't lie to me, Thomas William Sullivan," Eleanor said quietly. "I raised you better than that." Rebecca stepped forward, her professional smile firmly in place. "Eleanor, you misunderstood. We were just discussing boundaries, which are healthy in any family." "I understood perfectly well," Eleanor interrupted, something she had rarely done in all the years she'd known Rebecca. "I understood that you find my presence in your lives suffocating. That you wish I would disappear. That my weekly lunches with my son are considered an obligation rather than a joy." Thomas moved toward her, hands outstretched. "Mom, please, that's not what." Eleanor held up a hand, stopping him. "I've spent the last 17 years trying to be the perfect mother-in-law. I've respected your marriage, your parenting decisions, your need for space. I've offered help without imposing. I've loved Lily with my whole heart without trying to take over. I've been careful and considerate and constantly aware of boundaries." She turned to Rebecca, meeting her eyes directly. "And yet somehow, despite all that, you still want me to disappear." Rebecca had the grace to look uncomfortable, though her chin remained lifted in defiance. "You're taking things out of context. The context is quite clear," Eleanor said. "And now, I'd like you both to leave my house." Thomas looked stricken. "Mom, please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain. You lied to me about lunch because you couldn't bring yourself to tell me the truth, that spending an hour with me each week has become a burden. And you," she looked at Rebecca, "you want me to disappear. To stop being a presence in your lives. To stop being a grandmother to Lily." "I never said anything about Lily," Rebecca protested. "You didn't have to," Eleanor replied. "It was implied in every word. Now, please leave. I need some time to think. Thomas hesitated, clearly torn between his wife and his mother. Mom, we can talk about this. Work something out. Yes, Eleanor agreed, her voice soft but firm. We will. But not today. Today, I need you to respect my wishes and leave my home. After another moment of hesitation, Thomas nodded, gently taking Rebecca's elbow to guide her toward the door. Rebecca went, her back stiff, her silence speaking volumes. At the door, Thomas turned back. I'll call you later. Eleanor nodded but said nothing. She watched as they walked to Rebecca's BMW, got in, and drove away. Only when they were out of sight did she close the door, lock it, and allow her composure to crumble. The tears came then, hot and fierce, years of suppressed hurt breaking free like a flash flood in the desert. She cried for the relationship she'd tried so hard to build with Rebecca. She cried for Thomas, caught between his wife and his mother. She cried for Lily, who might become collateral damage in this family fracture. Most of all, she cried for herself, for the illusion she'd maintained that her careful consideration and love were enough to secure her place in her son's life. When the tears finally subsided, Eleanor found herself sitting on the floor of her entryway, back against the door, feeling hollow and spent. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the Mexican tile floor. The house was silent except for the steady tick of the grandfather clock in the living room, a wedding gift to her and William from his parents, who had welcomed her into their family with genuine warmth and acceptance. Eleanor pulled herself up, joints protesting the movement after sitting so long on the hard floor. She made her way to the kitchen, filled the kettle for tea, and tried to think clearly through the fog of emotional exhaustion. Rebecca wanted her to disappear, to remove herself from their lives in some significant way. And Thomas, her Thomas, who had been the center of her world for so long, had not defended her. Had, in fact, lied to avoid their weekly lunch. The kettle whistled, and Eleanor prepared her tea methodically, finding comfort in the familiar ritual. As she sat at her kitchen table, warming her hands around the mug, a sense of clarity began to emerge from the chaos of her thoughts. She had two choices. She could accept the diminished role Rebecca wanted for her, gradually fading from their lives until she became the grandmother they saw on obligatory holidays and occasional family events. Or she could take control of the situation herself, redefine the relationship on her own terms. Eleanor had spent her entire adult life putting others first. William's career ambitions, Thomas's educational needs, Rebecca's comfort, Lily's well-being. Even in widowhood, she had arranged her life to be convenient and undemanding for her son's family. Perhaps it was time to put herself first. To honor the woman William had loved, the woman who had strengths and dreams of her own, independent of her roles as wife, mother, mother-in-law, and grandmother. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became. If Rebecca wanted her to disappear, perhaps she should, but on her own terms, in her own way. Not skulking off to a retirement community in Florida, but making a statement that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. With newfound determination, Eleanor reached for her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she was looking for. James Watkins, the attorney who had handled William's estate and had been a friend to both of them for decades. James Watkins's office, a professional voice answered. This is Eleanor Sullivan. I need to speak with James as soon as possible regarding a change to my will and some property matters. Mrs. Sullivan, let me check his schedule. There was a brief pause. He has an opening tomorrow at 10 a.m. Would that work for you? Perfectly, Eleanor replied, a plan already forming in her mind. Please tell him it's urgent. After ending the call, Eleanor sat very still, contemplating the magnitude of what she was considering. It would shock them, hurt them, perhaps. But it would also force them to see her, truly see her, as a person with agency and determination. Not just a convenient grandmother who could be pushed to the periphery of their lives. Her phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. Mom, I'm so sorry about today. Can we talk? I can come over this evening. Eleanor stared at the message, considering her response carefully. Not tonight, she typed finally. I'm not ready. I'll let you know when I am. She set the phone aside and walked to the window, looking out at the desert garden she had cultivated with such care. The prickly pear cacti with their bright blooms. The ocotillo reaching skyward. The night blooming cereus waiting for its moment to shine. Like the desert plants she loved, Eleanor Sullivan had survived harsh conditions before. She had endured the scorching heat of grief when William died. She had adapted to the drought of loneliness that followed. She had learned to find beauty in difficult circumstances. And now, she would transform again, not by disappearing as Rebecca wished, but by reinventing herself in a way that her daughter-in-law never expected. Tomorrow, she would set her plan in motion. Tomorrow, she would begin to make Rebecca disappear instead. /artifact, I've created the first part of your YouTube script following the same emotional arc and storytelling structure as the original, but with a completely different story about a mother-in-law/daughter-in-law relationship. The story opens with a powerful hook about Eleanor Sullivan, a 73-year-old widow who overhears her daughter-in-law saying she should just disappear and decides to take matters into her own hands. This first part establishes Eleanor's character and her close relationship with her son Thomas, the complicated relationship with her daughter-in-law Rebecca, the inciting incident, overhearing Rebecca wish she would disappear, Eleanor's decision to fight back by making Rebecca disappear instead. The narrative follows a similar emotional journey to the original story but with unique characters, setting details, and relationship dynamics. I've made the protagonist a widow in Tucson rather than Phoenix, changed all names, and created a different family dynamic while maintaining the emotional impact and storytelling structure. In the soft light of James Watkins's office, Eleanor Sullivan sat with her spine straight, hands folded neatly in her lap, a posture of dignity she'd maintained through decades of life's challenges. The attorney leaned forward across his polished desk, concern evident in the deep creases around his eyes. "Eleanor, are you absolutely certain about this?" James asked, tapping the document between them. "It's quite dramatic." Eleanor smiled, a gentle curve of lips that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Dramatic circumstances call for dramatic responses, James. And yes, I'm certain." James had been their family attorney for over 30 years, handling everything from the purchase of their home to William's will. He'd watched Thomas grow from a gangly teenager to a successful dentist. He'd attended William's funeral and checked on Eleanor regularly in those first difficult months of widowhood. If anyone understood the careful, thoughtful woman Eleanor had always been, it was James. Which explained his obvious shock at her current instructions. "You understand this will cause quite a stir," he cautioned. "Family relationships are delicate things." "Some relationships are already broken," Eleanor replied, her voice steady despite the pain those words caused. "This isn't an impulsive decision, James. I've given it considerable thought." James sighed, recognizing the quiet determination in her eyes, the same look she'd had when she'd insisted on being the executor of William's estate despite everyone suggesting it might be too much for her. "Very well," he conceded. "I'll have the paperwork drawn up by the end of the week. The house sale can move forward once we have all the documents in order. As for the other matters, those will take a bit more time to arrange." "I understand. Thank you, James." As Eleanor drove home from the attorney's office, her phone buzzed repeatedly with incoming texts. Thomas, increasingly concerned by her silence. She had not returned his call since that fateful afternoon 2 days ago, responding only with brief texts assuring him she was fine but needed time. Eleanor knew her son. Knew he was torn between loyalty to his mother and peace in his marriage. Knew that any conversation now would result in him trying to smooth things over, to find a middle ground that would leave everyone partially satisfied but truly happy. That had always been Thomas's way, the peacemaker, the compromiser. But some things shouldn't be compromised. Self-respect. Dignity. The right to be treated with genuine care rather than reluctant obligation. At home, Eleanor moved through her daily routine with mechanical precision, her mind racing with plans and preparations. She sorted through photo albums, setting aside special pictures to be duplicated. She cataloged the family heirlooms, making notes about their history and significance. She organized William's architectural awards and drawings, preserving the legacy of his work. By evening, her dining room table was covered with neat piles of papers, photographs, and small treasures, the physical manifestation of a life well lived and memories carefully preserved. The doorbell rang just as she was making a cup of evening tea. Through the peephole, she saw Thomas standing on her porch, his expression a mixture of worry and determination. For a moment, Eleanor considered not answering. She wasn't ready for this conversation. But avoidance had never been her way. She opened the door, maintaining her composure despite the emotional turmoil beneath the surface. "Thomas." "Mom." Relief flooded his face. "Thank God. I've been so worried. Why haven't you been answering my calls?" "I told you I needed time," she replied, stepping back to allow him entry. "But I suppose we do need to talk eventually." Thomas followed her into the living room, his eyes widening at the organized chaos on the dining room table. "What's all this? Are you cleaning out?" In a manner of speaking, Eleanor said, settling into her favorite armchair and gesturing for Thomas to take the sofa. "I'm organizing things. Making sure everything is properly documented." Thomas's brow furrowed with concern. "Mom, about what happened the other day, you lied to me," Eleanor interrupted, her voice calm but firm. "For the first time in our relationship, you deliberately lied to avoid having lunch with me." Thomas winced. I shouldn't have lied. That was wrong. I'm sorry. Why did you? He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so like William that it made Eleanor's heart ache. Rebecca and I have been discussing family boundaries. She feels that sometimes our extended family obligations take precedence over our immediate family needs. Extended family, Eleanor repeated, the words tasting bitter. Is that what I am now? Extended family? That's not what I meant, Thomas protested. You know you're important to me. To us. It's just that with Rebecca's promotion and Lily's college applications and my practice expanding, we're all under a lot of pressure. And your weekly lunch with your mother was the obligation that needed to be cut, Eleanor concluded. No. I didn't want to cancel our lunch. I just needed to talk to Rebecca first, to work things out. That's why we came here, to discuss how to handle everything. I never expected you to overhear that my daughter-in-law wishes I would disappear. Eleanor finished for him. That she finds my presence suffocating? That she resents my involvement in your lives despite my constant efforts to respect your boundaries? Thomas looked miserable. She didn't mean it the way it sounded. Rebecca's stressed with work, and sometimes she says things more harshly than she intends. And yet you didn't defend me, Eleanor said quietly. You didn't tell her that wishing your mother would disappear was unacceptable. I was trying to de-escalate the situation by sacrificing me, Eleanor concluded. Thomas fell silent, unable to deny the truth in her words. I've been thinking a lot these past 2 days, Eleanor continued after a moment. About my place in your life. In Lily's life. About what I want for my remaining years. Mom, please don't do anything drastic, like disappear? Eleanor asked with a raised eyebrow. Isn't that what Rebecca wants? That's not fair. No, it isn't, Eleanor agreed. None of this is fair. It isn't fair that after everything, after raising you alone when your father died, after helping with Lily, after always being careful not to intrude, I'm still seen as an inconvenience to be managed rather than a person to be loved. Thomas moved to sit beside her, taking her hands in his. I love you, Mom. That hasn't changed. Won't ever change. Love without respect isn't enough, Eleanor said gently, removing her hands from his. Love without action is just sentiment. What do you want me to do? Thomas asked, desperation creeping into his voice. Just tell me, and I'll do it. Eleanor studied her son's face, the boy she'd raised now hidden behind the worried features of a middle-aged man caught between competing loyalties. I want you to leave now, she said finally. Go home to your wife and daughter. I have decisions to make, and I need to make them without your influence or guilt. Mom, I'm not cutting you out, Thomas. I'm taking time to determine what kind of relationship we can have moving forward. One that respects my dignity in your marriage. Now please, go home. After Thomas left, reluctantly and with multiple assurances that he would call tomorrow, Eleanor returned to her sorting with renewed purpose. The path ahead was clear now, though painful. She would redefine herself and her relationships on her own terms. No more waiting by the phone for invitations that came out of obligation rather than desire. No more careful diplomacy with a daughter-in-law who fundamentally wished she would disappear. No more pretending that weekly lunches and occasional family dinners were enough to sustain her soul. The next morning, Eleanor called Maria Rivera, her realtor friend from Garden Club. I need to sell my house, she explained. Quietly, but quickly. Eleanor. Are you moving to be closer to Thomas? Maria asked, surprised but immediately professional. No, Eleanor replied. I'm moving to be closer to myself. Maria came over that afternoon, walking through the house with appraising eyes, making notes about its selling points, the authentic saltillo tile floors, the updated kitchen, the xeriscaped desert garden that required minimal water, the mountain views from the backyard patio. The market is hot right now, Maria explained as they sat at the kitchen table reviewing comparable sales in the neighborhood. A house like this, in this condition, in this location? We could list it Friday and have multiple offers by Monday. Are you sure you're ready for that? Absolutely, Eleanor confirmed. The sooner the better. May I ask where you're planning to go? Maria inquired gently. Have you found another place? Eleanor smiled, the first genuine smile in days. Yes, actually. I have somewhere very specific in mind. After Maria left with promises to prepare the listing agreement immediately, Eleanor called her friend Marjorie from the library. I need your help with something unconventional, Eleanor explained after pleasantries were exchanged. And I need your complete discretion. Intriguing, Marjorie replied. Tell me more. Over the next 3 days, Eleanor moved with quiet efficiency, setting her plan in motion piece by careful piece. She visited her bank and adjusted her accounts. She met with a storage company about temporarily housing her most precious belongings. She had long conversations with James Watkins about legal details. She spent an afternoon with a photographer, documenting her home and garden. She made appointments with various service providers. All the while, she maintained minimal contact with Thomas, responding to his increasingly worried texts with brief assurances that she was fine but still needed space. She ignored Rebecca's single text message entirely, seeing it for what it was, an attempt to smooth things over without addressing the fundamental issue. On Friday morning, exactly 1 week after overhearing Rebecca's wish that she would disappear, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table waiting for Maria to arrive with the listing agreement. Her house was immaculate, staged to perfection with Maria's suggestions: fewer personal photos, neutral decorative touches, fresh flowers in strategic locations. The doorbell rang precisely at 10 a.m. Maria stood on the porch with a professional smile and a folder of documents. "Everything's ready," she announced, settling at the kitchen table and spreading out the paperwork. "We've priced it aggressively. At $475,000. Given the market and the condition of your home, I expect we'll see offers above that, possibly even cash offers with minimal contingencies." Eleanor reviewed the listing agreement carefully, noting the commission structure, marketing plan, and timeline. Everything was in order. "This looks perfect," she said, signing her name with a steady hand. "When will it go live?" "This afternoon," Maria replied. "I have the photographer coming at noon. The listing should be on the MLS by 4 p.m., and I've already scheduled an open house for Sunday." "Excellent," Eleanor said, a sense of calm purpose settling over her. "And you'll text me when it's officially listed?" "Of course." After Maria left, Eleanor made one more important call, to Lily's cell phone. "Grandma." Lily answered, her voice warm with genuine affection. "What's up? Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, sweetheart," Eleanor assured her. "I was wondering if you might come over this afternoon after school. There's something I'd like to talk to you about." "Sure," Lily agreed easily. "I have debate practice until 4:30, but I could come by around 5? Is that okay?" "That's perfect. I'll see you then." The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. The photographer arrived, capturing images of every room, the garden, and the mountain views. Maria texted confirmation that the listing would go live at 4 p.m. as planned. James Watkins called to confirm that the additional legal documents were ready for her signature on Monday. At 4:15, Eleanor's phone pinged with a text from Maria, listed. "Already have 3 showing requests for tomorrow. Here's the link." Eleanor clicked through, seeing her beloved home presented as a commodity: charming Southwest contemporary with mountain views, spacious owner's suite with spa-like bath, chef's kitchen with quartz countertops. The photographs were beautiful, showcasing the house's best features while somehow stripping away the soul that made it a home. Perfect. At precisely 5:02 p.m., Lily's car pulled into the driveway. Eleanor watched from the window as her granddaughter emerged, tall and graceful at 17, with William's dark hair and Thomas's kind eyes. Despite everything, the sight of Lily never failed to fill Eleanor with joy and pride. "Grandma," Lily called as she entered, dropping her backpack by the door and enveloping Eleanor in a warm hug that smelled of coconut shampoo and the faint remnants of the perfume Eleanor had given her for her birthday. "I've missed you. Dad said you weren't feeling well this week." "Did he now?" Eleanor replied, leading Lily to the living room. "What else did your father say?" Lily's expressive face clouded slightly. "Not much. Just that you and Mom had a misunderstanding and needed some space. Is everything okay?" Eleanor patted the sofa cushion beside her. "Sit with me, sweetheart. We need to talk." Lily sat, her intelligent eyes studying Eleanor's face with concern. "You're scaring me a little, Grandma. Are you sick or something?" "No, nothing like that," Eleanor assured her. "But there are going to be some changes, and I wanted you to hear about them from me directly." "What kind of changes?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "I've decided to sell this house." "What?" Lily gasped, genuine shock registering on her face. "But you love this house. All your memories with Grandpa are here. Your garden, why would you sell it?" "Because it's time for me to make a change," Eleanor explained gently. "To create a new chapter for myself." "But where will you go? Are you moving to one of those retirement communities?" "Because if you're worried about managing the house, I could help more. I could come over weekends and—" "Lily," Eleanor interrupted, touched by her granddaughter's immediate offer of help. "This isn't about maintenance or management. It's about making choices that honor who I am now, not just who I've been." Lily's brow furrowed in confusion. "I don't understand." "Your mother and I had a difficult conversation last week," Eleanor explained carefully, not wanting to damage Lily's relationship with Rebecca but needing to be truthful. It made me realize that I've been trying to fit myself into spaces where I'm not fully welcome. I've been compromising my own happiness to avoid rocking the boat. Did Mom say something to hurt you? Lily asked, her loyalty immediately evident. Your mother expressed her honest feelings, Eleanor said diplomatically. And while those feelings were painful to hear, they helped me recognize that I need to make some changes. I need to reclaim my own identity apart from being just someone's mother or grandmother. But you're not just anything, Lily protested. You're Eleanor Sullivan. You're amazing and strong and wise, and this is crazy. You can't just sell your house and disappear because Mom said something thoughtless. Eleanor smiled sadly at her granddaughter's passionate defense. I'm not disappearing, Lily. I'm transforming. There's a difference. But where will you go? Lily demanded again. Where will we have Christmas and Thanksgiving? Where will I stay when I need a break from home? That's part of what I wanted to talk to you about, Eleanor said, reaching for an envelope on the coffee table. This is for you. Don't open it yet, it's something for your future. But I want you to know that no matter where I am, you will always have a place with me. Lily took the envelope reluctantly, tears welling in her eyes. I don't like this, Grandma. It feels like you're saying goodbye. Not goodbye, Eleanor corrected, squeezing Lily's hand. Just, see you differently. They talked for another hour, Lily alternating between trying to convince Eleanor to reconsider and asking practical questions about her plans. Eleanor shared what she could without revealing everything. Yes, she had a destination in mind. No, she wasn't moving to be closer to family. Yes, she would still see Lily regularly. No, she hadn't told Thomas about the house listing yet. He's going to freak out, Lily predicted, wiping away tears. Like, total meltdown freak out. Your father is more resilient than you might think, Eleanor said with a small smile. He survived your grandfather's death, dental school, and raising a strong-willed daughter. He'll survive this too. When Lily finally left, promising to keep the house sale confidential until Eleanor was ready to tell Thomas, Eleanor felt both emotionally drained and strangely exhilarated. The first piece of her plan was in motion. The most important person, Lily, understood at least partially what she was doing and why. She checked her phone to find 3 missed calls from Thomas. And a text asking if they could talk tomorrow. Eleanor responded with a brief yes, come by at 11 a.m., knowing that by then, the open house signs would be posted in her front yard and the reality of her decision would be unavoidable. That night, Eleanor sat in her garden as the desert sunset painted the mountains in shades of pink and gold. The night-blooming cereus was preparing to open, its single bud swollen with promise. Eleanor checked the motion-activated camera she had set up to capture its brief, magnificent bloom, an annual tradition she had maintained since William first pointed out the miracle plant to her decades ago. As darkness fell, Eleanor reflected on the path ahead. There would be pain, yes. Conflict. Misunderstanding. But there would also be growth, discovery, and hopefully, eventually, a new kind of relationship with her son and daughter-in-law, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation. Rebecca had wished she would disappear. But Eleanor Sullivan had other plans. She wasn't going to disappear at all. She was going to become more visible than ever before. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect desert day that reminded Eleanor why she had fallen in love with Tucson all those years ago. She dressed with particular care, a coral blouse that William had always said made her look vibrant, linen slacks, her favorite silver earrings. This was not a day for faded pastels or comfortable obscurity. At 10:30, Maria texted, first showing in 15 minutes. For more scheduled before the open house tomorrow. Lots of online interest already. Eleanor acknowledged the message with a mixture of satisfaction and bittersweet nostalgia. This house had been her sanctuary for nearly 4 decades. Soon, it would belong to someone else, who would create their own memories within its walls. At precisely 11 a.m., Thomas's car pulled into the driveway, parking behind the unfamiliar vehicle of the prospective buyers who were currently touring the house with Maria. Eleanor watched from the window as Thomas noticed the "for sale" sign, his body language shifting from casual to rigid with shock. He practically ran to the front door, jabbing the doorbell repeatedly. Eleanor opened it calmly, stepping aside as he burst in. "Mom, what the hell?" he demanded, gesturing wildly toward the yard. "You're selling the house? When were you going to tell me?" "I'm telling you now," Eleanor replied evenly. "Please lower your voice. There are people viewing the property." Thomas stared at her in disbelief, then at the young couple and Maria emerging from the hallway. "I'm sorry," he said to them, visibly struggling to compose himself. "Could you give us a moment? Family matter." "Of course," Maria said smoothly, guiding the couple toward the backyard. "Let's look at the desert garden while they talk." When they were alone, Thomas turned to Eleanor, hurt and confusion evident in every line of his face. Why? Why would you do this without talking to me first? Because it's my decision to make, Eleanor said simply. My house. My life. But this is our family home. Thomas protested. Dad designed this house. We have decades of memories here. You can't just sell it without even discussing it. Like you and Rebecca discussed cutting back on our weekly lunches? Eleanor countered. Like you discussed her wish that I would disappear? Were you planning to consult me about those decisions? Thomas paled. That's different, is it? Both involve significant changes to our family relationships. The difference is that I'm being transparent about my decision rather than having whispered conversations behind your back. This is because of what Rebecca said, isn't it? Thomas asked, his voice dropping. You're punishing us, punishing her, by selling the house. This isn't about punishment, Thomas. This is about reclaiming my agency. Rebecca made it clear that she wants me to have a smaller role in your lives. I'm simply accommodating that wish, but on my terms, not hers. By selling our family home? How does that solve anything? It creates space, Eleanor explained, maintaining her calm despite the turmoil beneath the surface. Physical and emotional space for all of us to redefine our relationships. Space for me to create a new life that doesn't revolve around waiting for invitations or measuring my words to avoid offending Rebecca. Where will you go? Thomas asked, the same question Lily had posed. I have plans, Eleanor said simply. Solid plans that I've thought through carefully. Thomas ran his hands through his hair in frustration. Mom, please, can't we talk about this? Can't we find some compromise that doesn't involve selling the house? I've spent 17 years compromising, Thomas. 17 years carefully navigating Rebecca's moods and preferences. 17 years watching my role in your life and Lily's life gradually diminish. Now I'm making choices for myself. Does Lily know? Yes. I told her yesterday. Before you told me? Thomas looked wounded afresh. I wanted her to hear it from me directly, not through the filter of your and Rebecca's reactions. Thomas paced the living room, agitation in every movement. This is crazy, Mom. You're overreacting to one bad moment, one thoughtless comment. No, Eleanor interrupted firmly. I'm responding to years of subtle and not so subtle messages that my presence is tolerated rather than welcomed. I'm acknowledging the reality of my relationship with Rebecca instead of pretending that everything is fine when it clearly isn't. So you're just giving up? Walking away from us? I'm not giving up, Thomas. I'm changing the terms of engagement. There's a difference. The sound of Maria returning with the prospective buyers interrupted their conversation. The Johnsons have a few questions about the property taxes, Eleanor, she called from the hallway. I'll be right there, Eleanor replied, then turned back to Thomas. I need to handle this. We can continue our conversation later. Later when? Thomas demanded. After you've sold our family home out from under us? After you've disappeared just like Rebecca wanted? I'm not disappearing, Eleanor said firmly. I'm transforming. And if you and Rebecca want to be part of that transformation, you'll need to accept that our relationship is changing too. As she turned to join Maria and the prospective buyers, Eleanor caught a glimpse of Thomas's face, shocked, hurt, and, finally, perhaps, beginning to understand that his mother was not simply an extension of his needs and expectations, but a woman with her own identity and boundaries. Exactly as she had intended. By Sunday afternoon, Eleanor's house had been viewed by 17 potential buyers. The open house had drawn a steady stream of people, young couples imagining raising families in the spacious rooms, retirees admiring the accessibility of the single-level layout, investors calculating rental potential in Tucson's hot market. Maria had collected 5 business cards from realtors who promised their clients would be submitting offers first thing Monday morning. I told you it would move quickly, Maria said as she gathered her materials after the final visitors departed. But this is extraordinary even in today's market. I think we'll have multiple offers over asking price by tomorrow afternoon. Eleanor nodded, a complex mixture of emotions washing over her as she looked around the living room, now depersonalized with many family photos removed, staged to appeal to strangers rather than reflecting the life she had built here. Have you heard from Thomas since yesterday? Maria asked cautiously, aware of the family tension surrounding the sale. Oh yes, Eleanor replied with a wry smile. Multiple texts, phone calls, and one very uncomfortable family dinner last night. After their confrontation on Saturday, Thomas had gone home and apparently told Rebecca about the house sale. This had triggered a flurry of activity, Rebecca calling an emergency family meeting, Lily refusing to attend until her parents stopped being ridiculous, and finally, a tense invitation for Eleanor to come to dinner at their home to discuss the situation rationally. The dinner had been exactly as uncomfortable as Eleanor had anticipated. Rebecca, maintaining a thin veneer of concerned supportiveness that didn't quite mask her underlying resentment. Thomas, alternating between trying to understand Eleanor's perspective and attempting to talk her out of her decision. Lily, unusually quiet, observing the adults with the shrewd assessment of a teenager who sees more than they're given credit for. I just don't understand the rush, Rebecca had said, serving Eleanor a smaller portion of lasagna than everyone else, a subtle power play that Eleanor might once have ignored but now noted with detached amusement. If you truly want to downsize, we could take time to find you something suitable nearby. Perhaps one of those nice senior communities with activities and support services. I'm not interested in a senior community, Eleanor had replied calmly. And I'm not interested in living nearby. Then where? Thomas had asked for at least the 10th time since discovering the "for sale" sign. You keep saying you have plans, but you won't tell us what they are. Because my plans are still developing, Eleanor had explained, which was partly true. The framework was solidly in place, but some details were still being finalized. And because I want to make these decisions without the weight of your opinions influencing me. We're your family, Rebecca had countered, her professional smile not reaching her eyes. Of course our opinions should matter. Like my opinion mattered when you decided I should disappear? Eleanor had asked pointedly. That had silenced the table momentarily, until Lily, wonderful, perceptive Lily, had changed the subject to her college applications, creating a welcome diversion from the tension. Now, as Maria packed up her open house materials, Eleanor reflected on how differently that dinner might have gone if she had approached it from her usual perspective of trying to keep the peace at any cost. She would have absorbed Rebecca's subtle barbs, accepted Thomas's well-intentioned but patronizing suggestions, and probably left feeling diminished and unheard. Instead, she had maintained her boundaries, spoken her truth without apology, and departed with her dignity intact. The difference was remarkable, not in their reactions, which were predictable, but in how she felt afterward. Not drained and defeated, but energized and empowered. Well, I should have preliminary offers for you to review by tomorrow afternoon, Maria said, bringing Eleanor back to the present. Do you want me to email them, or would you prefer to meet in person? Email first, then we can meet to discuss. Any that look promising, Eleanor replied. I'd like to move quickly once we have a solid offer. After Maria left, Eleanor walked through her house alone, running her fingers along familiar surfaces, remembering moments both significant and mundane that had occurred within these walls. William constructing Lily's first crib in what was now the guest bedroom. Thomas learning to walk, his little hands gripping the coffee table for balance. The Christmas morning when William had surprised her with the antique writing desk that now sat in her reading room. Memories were embedded in these walls, yes. But Eleanor had come to realize that she carried the most important memories within her. They wouldn't disappear with the house sale. They would travel with her, informing her future without trapping her in the past. Her phone chimed with an incoming text from Thomas. Mom, please reconsider. Give us time to work this out as a family. Eleanor didn't respond immediately. Thomas still didn't understand that this wasn't a negotiation or a cry for attention. This was a woman in her 70s reclaiming her right to self-determination after decades of putting others first. Instead, she texted Marjorie, everything still on schedule for tomorrow? The response came quickly, all systems go. Can't wait. Monday morning dawned with the clarity that only desert skies can deliver. Eleanor had slept surprisingly well, considering the magnitude of changes unfolding in her life. Perhaps because, for the first time in years, she was acting rather than reacting. Creating circumstances rather than merely responding to them. She dressed carefully in a tailored pantsuit that she had purchased for a library fundraiser last year, sophisticated navy blue with a subtle pattern that brought out the blue of her eyes. Professional but not severe. Confident without being aggressive. Perfect for the meetings that lay ahead. Her first appointment was with James Watkins, who had called over the weekend to confirm that all the legal documents were ready for her signature. Eleanor arrived at his office precisely at 9 a.m., ready to formalize the decisions she had been contemplating since overhearing Rebecca's wish that she would disappear. Good morning, Eleanor, James greeted her, rising from behind his desk. You look well. Determined. I am both, she confirmed, settling into the visitor's chair. James laid out several documents on the polished surface between them. I've prepared everything as you requested. The amendments to your will, the establishment of the trust for Lily, the power of attorney documents, and the paperwork for the purchase you're considering. Eleanor reviewed each document carefully, asking questions where needed, making small adjustments to wording here and there. This was not a process to be rushed, despite her desire to move quickly on the house sale. The trust for Lily is structured exactly as we discussed, James explained, pointing out key sections. The funds will be available to her for educational expenses immediately, with the bulk becoming accessible when she turns 25, with provisions for earlier access under specific circumstances. And Thomas won't be able to access or control these funds? Eleanor confirmed. No. You're naming me as trustee, with Marjorie as successor trustee should anything happen to me. Thomas and Rebecca will have no legal authority over this trust. Eleanor nodded, satisfied. And the power of attorney documents? Also as discussed. I'll hold medical power of attorney, with Marjorie as backup. Neither gives your family the ability to override your clearly stated wishes. Good. Eleanor signed each document with careful deliberation, feeling the weight of each decision. But also the liberation of taking control of her future. The final document was for a significant purchase, one that represented the cornerstone of her transformation. Eleanor reviewed the terms one last time, then signed with a flourish. I'll process everything immediately, James assured her. The funds for the purchase will be transferred this afternoon, and I'll contact you once confirmation comes through. Thank you, James, for everything. Eleanor stood to leave, then paused. There's one more thing. I'd like you to be present when I tell Thomas and Rebecca about these changes. As both my attorney and my friend. James studied her face for a moment, then nodded. Of course. Just let me know when. Her next appointment was with Marjorie at the library, where they had arranged to use the small conference room for privacy. Marjorie was waiting with another woman, Sophia Chen, the tech consultant they had hired to help with the digital aspects of Eleanor's plan. Everything's ready on my end, Marjorie confirmed after introductions were made. The library board approved your proposal unanimously. They're thrilled, actually. And I've set up all the accounts and platforms you requested, Sophia added, opening her laptop to display a series of websites, social media profiles, and digital tools. I can walk you through how everything works, or I can manage it for you. Initially until you're comfortable taking over. A combination of both would be ideal, Eleanor decided. I want to understand everything, but I recognize there's a learning curve. For the next 2 hours, Eleanor absorbed information about digital platforms she had barely used before: Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, podcast hosting sites, blog platforms. Sophia was patient and thorough, explaining each tool's purpose and demonstrating how Eleanor could use them to share her story. Remember, consistency is key with building an online presence, Sophia advised. Regular posts, engaging with followers, staying true to your authentic voice. My authentic voice, Eleanor repeated thoughtfully. That's something I'm still rediscovering. Based on what Marjorie has told me about your story, I think a lot of people will relate to your journey, Sophia said encouragingly. Women your age who feel invisible or taken for granted. People of any age who are trying to reclaim their identity after focusing on others for so long. You could inspire so many people, Eleanor. That was precisely Eleanor's hope, not just to transform her own life, but perhaps to help others recognize that it's never too late to stand up for your own worth, to demand respect rather than mere tolerance, to rebuild relationships on healthier foundations. After the meeting with Sophia, Eleanor had lunch with Marjorie at a small cafe near the library. Their friendship had deepened significantly over the past week as Marjorie had become not just a confidant but an active participant in Eleanor's transformation. Are you nervous about telling Thomas and Rebecca the full extent of your plans? Marjorie asked over soup and salad. Eleanor considered the question carefully. Not nervous exactly. Sad, perhaps, that it's come to this. But also, I don't know, exhilarated? For so long, I've calibrated my behavior to avoid confrontation, to keep peace, to be the perfect mother and grandmother who never imposes or demands. There's a certain freedom in finally prioritizing my own needs. It's about time, Marjorie said firmly. I've watched you tiptoe around Rebecca's feelings for years. Always careful not to overstep, always backing away when she put up barriers between you and Lily. You've been far more accommodating than I would have been. I wanted to respect their marriage, their family unit, Eleanor explained. After William died, I was so afraid of becoming the stereotypical intrusive widow who clings to her son because she has nothing else. I bent over backward to prove I wasn't that person. And in doing so, you allowed Rebecca to gradually push you to the margins of your own family, Marjorie observed. Until she literally wished you would disappear. Yes, Eleanor acknowledged. But that's changing now. Her phone buzzed with an email notification from Maria. The first offers on the house had come in. Eleanor scanned the details quickly, her eyebrows rising at the numbers. Good news? Marjorie asked. Very, Eleanor confirmed. 3 offers already, all over asking price. One is a cash offer with minimal contingencies. Perfect, Marjorie said with satisfaction. Everything's falling into place. By the time Eleanor returned home, Thomas had called twice and left increasingly worried messages. She texted him briefly, "I'm fine. Meeting with my attorney tomorrow. At 10 a.m. Please come with Rebecca. Important information to share." His response was immediate, "Mom, please talk to me now. What's going on? What attorney?" Eleanor replied simply, "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., James Watkins's office. It's time for complete transparency." She turned her attention to the offers Maria had sent, reviewing each carefully before calling to discuss them. The cash offer was indeed the most attractive, a young tech couple relocating from California who had fallen in love with the house during yesterday's open house and were prepared to pay $515,000 with a 2-week closing period. "They're motivated buyers," Maria explained. "They've already been pre-approved, and they're willing to be flexible on the closing date if you need more time to relocate." 2 weeks is perfect, actually, Eleanor replied. "Let's accept their offer." With that decision made, Eleanor spent the evening finalizing the last details of her plan. She spoke with Sophia again about the blog post and social media announcements. That would go live tomorrow after her meeting with Thomas and Rebecca. She confirmed arrangements with the moving company that would pack and store her belongings temporarily. She had one last conversation with James to ensure he was prepared for the likely emotional scene at tomorrow's meeting. Eleanor slept soundly. That night, waking before dawn to watch the sunrise from her patio, one of the last times she would do so from this house. The desert awakened around her, a coyote trotting along the wash behind her property, quail families marching in formation across the yard, the first hummingbird of the day visiting the feeder she had maintained for decades. She would miss this view, these morning rituals. But the excitement of what lay ahead outweighed the nostalgia for what she was leaving behind. At precisely 10 a.m., Eleanor sat in James Watkins's conference room, her attorney beside her, waiting for Thomas and Rebecca to arrive. They were late, unusual for Thomas, who typically inherited his father's punctuality, but perhaps understandable, given the circumstances. At 10:12, they finally entered, both looking tense and slightly disheveled, as if they had argued in the car on the way over. Eleanor noted with interest that they had not brought Lily, despite her being on spring break this week. "Mom," Thomas said immediately, foregoing any greeting. "What is this about? Why are we meeting with your attorney?" "Please, sit down," James said professionally, gesturing to the chairs across the conference table. "Eleanor has some important information to share with you both." Rebecca settled into her chair with reluctance, her body language closed and defensive. "If this is about the house sale, we've made our position clear. We think it's hasty and unnecessary." "This meeting concerns more than just the house sale," Eleanor explained calmly. "It's about all the changes I'm making in my life, changes that will affect our family relationships moving forward." "What changes?" Thomas asked warily. Eleanor took a deep breath, then began the speech she had carefully prepared. "As you know, I've listed my house for sale. What you don't know is that I've already accepted an offer, $515,000 cash, with a 2-week closing period." 2 weeks? Thomas exclaimed. "That's impossible. Where will you go?" "I've purchased a small condominium in the Catalina foothills," Eleanor revealed. "It will be my home base, though I'll be traveling extensively." "Traveling?" Rebecca repeated, confusion evident in her tone. "What do you mean, traveling?" "I've established what's called a digital nomad lifestyle," Eleanor explained, enjoying their bewildered expressions. "I'll be documenting my journey of self-rediscovery through a blog, social media, and eventually a podcast, all focused on helping women my age reclaim their identity and worth after spending decades focused on others." The stunned silence that followed was exactly what Eleanor had anticipated. Thomas looked as if she had announced plans to join the circus, while Rebecca's perfectly maintained facade showed cracks of genuine shock. "You're becoming a blogger?" Thomas finally managed. "Among other things," Eleanor confirmed. "My first post goes live this afternoon, titled, 'When Your Daughter-in-Law Wishes You Would Disappear.'" Rebecca paled visibly. "You wouldn't." "I've changed the names, of course," Eleanor continued smoothly. "But yes, Rebecca, I would. My story resonates with countless women who have been made to feel invisible in their families, who have been treated as inconveniences rather than valued members. Women who, like me, have spent decades accommodating others' needs while suppressing their own." "This is insane," Rebecca said, looking to Thomas for support. "She's trying to publicly humiliate us because of one offhand comment made during a private conversation." "It wasn't just one comment," Eleanor countered. "It was the culmination of years of subtle and not so subtle messages that my presence in your lives is tolerated rather than welcomed. Years of cancelled visits, decreased invitations, and diplomatic distance. The comment simply confirmed what I had long suspected, that you would prefer I wasn't part of your family at all. That's not fair, Thomas protested. We've included you in what, Thomas? Holiday dinners when it was convenient? Occasional family gatherings when there wasn't something more important on your calendar? Tell me honestly, when was the last time you invited me to your home simply because you wanted my company, not because it was an obligation or a special occasion? Thomas fell silent, unable to provide an example. I thought so, Eleanor said softly. And that's why things are changing. I'm not going to disappear as Rebecca wished, but I am going to transform our relationship into something healthier for all of us. And how exactly are you financing this transformation? Rebecca asked, ever practical about money matters. Blogging isn't exactly lucrative, especially for someone with no experience. Eleanor smiled. That brings us to the other reason for this meeting. James, would you explain the changes I've made to my estate plan? James nodded, opening a folder on the table. Eleanor has made significant amendments to her will and established several trusts. The primary changes are as follows. First, she has created an educational trust for Lily, which will cover her college expenses regardless of where she chooses to attend. This trust is irrevocable and will be administered by me, not by either of you. Rebecca's eyes narrowed at this direct removal of her control over Lily's educational funds. Second, James continued, Eleanor has established a living trust that will manage her assets during her lifetime and distribute them according to her wishes after her death. The house proceeds will primarily fund her new endeavors, with a portion set aside for Lily's future beyond education. And what about us? Thomas asked quietly. Are we being cut out completely? No, Eleanor said gently. You'll receive your father's architectural awards and drawings, family heirlooms with sentimental value, and a modest financial bequest. But the bulk of my estate will go to Lily and to a foundation I'm establishing to help women reclaim their independence later in life. You're punishing us, Rebecca said flatly. Using your money to get back at us for not giving you enough attention. No, Rebecca, Eleanor replied with genuine compassion. I'm not punishing you. I'm honoring myself and my values. There's a difference. My money is going to support causes I believe in and a granddaughter I love dearly. How is that punishment? Because you're doing it to spite us? Rebecca insisted, her composure finally cracking completely. You're turning our private family matters into public content for your blog or whatever this midlife crisis project is. I'm 73, Rebecca, Eleanor pointed out mildly. Well past midlife. This isn't a crisis, it's a renaissance. Thomas, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during this exchange, finally spoke. Mom, I understand that you're hurt. I understand that things need to change. But isn't there a less dramatic way to address this? A way that doesn't involve selling our family home, broadcasting our private issues, and restructuring your entire life? Eleanor studied her son's face, seeing both the man he had become and the boy she had raised. This isn't just about being hurt, Thomas. It's about recognizing that the relationship we've had isn't working anymore. It's about refusing to accept being an afterthought in my own family. It's about showing Lily that women don't lose their value or agency as they age. And what about Lily in all this? Rebecca demanded. Have you considered how confused and upset she'll be by these changes? Lily knows, Eleanor said simply. Not all the details, but the broad strokes. She understands that I'm creating a new chapter for myself, and she supports it. In fact, she'll be helping me with some of the technical aspects of my online presence. You've involved our daughter in this scheme without our knowledge or consent. Rebecca's voice rose with indignation. Lily is 17, highly intelligent, and capable of forming her own opinions, Eleanor reminded them. And yes, I spoke with her directly because I wanted her to hear about these changes from me, not through your interpretations. This is unbelievable, Rebecca muttered, turning to Thomas. Are you just going to sit there while your mother dismantles our family and turns our daughter against us? No one is turning anyone against anyone, Eleanor said firmly. I've been extremely careful not to damage Lily's relationship with either of you. But I also won't pretend that everything is fine when it isn't. I won't model for Lily that women should silently accept being marginalized as they age. So what happens now? Thomas asked, running his hands through his hair in a gesture of frustration and helplessness that reminded Eleanor painfully of William. Now, we begin to build a new kind of relationship, Eleanor said, her voice softening. One based on mutual respect rather than obligation. One where we see each other as we truly are, not as we wish each other to be. One where I don't disappear. But I don't hover either. Where you don't avoid me, but you don't control me either. And if we don't want this new relationship? Rebecca asked bluntly. Then that will be your choice, Eleanor replied with equal directness. But it won't change my plans. My blog launches today. My house closes in 2 weeks. My journey begins regardless of whether you choose to be part of it. The meeting ended shortly thereafter, with Thomas requesting time to process everything and Rebecca departing in stony silence. James walked Eleanor to her car, concern evident in his expression. Are you all right? He asked gently. Eleanor considered the question seriously before answering. Yes, she said finally. For the first time in years, I think I truly am. As she drove home, to the house that would soon belong to someone else, Eleanor felt a profound sense of both loss and liberation. Relationships would be strained, perhaps permanently altered. Difficult conversations lay ahead. Adjustments would need to be made by everyone. But she had finally spoken her truth without apology. She had reclaimed her right to self-determination. She had refused to disappear as Rebecca had wished. Instead, she was about to become more visible than ever before. Eleanor sat at the sleek modern desk in her new Catalina Foothills condominium, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that framed a spectacular view of the mountains. 6 months had passed since that fateful afternoon when she'd overheard Rebecca wishing she would disappear. 6 transformative months that had redefined her life in ways she never could have imagined. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she considered how to begin today's blog post. The blinking cursor seemed to pulse with anticipation, much like her own heart these days, steady but energized, measuring out a rhythm of purpose rather than mere existence. 6 months of visibility, what I've learned about standing in my truth, she typed, smiling at the title. Her blog, Refusing to Disappear, had struck a chord with women across the country, and increasingly, around the world. What had begun as a personal journey of reclaiming her worth had blossomed into a movement that resonated with thousands of women in their 60s, 70s, and beyond who refused to fade into the background of their families' lives. The statistics on her dashboard still amazed her: 127,000 subscribers. Nearly 1 million page views. A podcast that consistently ranked in the top 50 in its category. Speaking invitations from women's groups across the country. A book deal. With a respected publisher specializing in women's empowerment. All because she had decided that disappearing was not an option. A notification pinged on her phone, a text from Sophia, her tech consultant turned friend and business partner. CNN interview confirmed for next Wednesday. They want to focus on the intergenerational aspect of your work. Eleanor texted back. A quick, wonderful, before returning to her blog post. The CNN interview would be her most high-profile media appearance yet, an opportunity to reach even more women with her message that aging didn't mean accepting invisibility. As she crafted her post, reflecting on the lessons of the past 6 months, Eleanor heard the gentle chime of the elevator arriving at her private foyer. Few people had access to her direct elevator, a security feature of the luxury building that had seemed excessive when she purchased the condominium but had proven valuable as her public profile grew. "Grandma?" Lily's voice called from the entryway. "Are you home?" "In my office, sweetheart," Eleanor called back, saving her draft and rising to greet her granddaughter. Lily appeared in the doorway, her tall frame silhouetted against the hallway light. At 18 now, with her first semester of college behind her, she carried herself with a new confidence that made Eleanor's heart swell with pride. "I brought lunch," Lily announced, holding up a bag from their favorite Mediterranean restaurant. "And I have news." They settled on Eleanor's balcony, spreading out containers of hummus, tabbouleh, and warm pita bread on the small table that overlooked the city below. The December air was crisp but pleasant, one of the benefits of Tucson winters that Eleanor had always appreciated. "So what's this news?" Eleanor asked, passing Lily a plate. "Something about school?" "Sort of," Lily replied, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I've been accepted into the summer journalism program at Columbia. The one I told you about that's super competitive. Only 30 students nationwide get in each year." "Oh, Lily." Eleanor reached across the table to squeeze her granddaughter's hand. "That's wonderful. I'm so proud of you." "I couldn't have done it without you," Lily said earnestly. The personal essay portion asked about a significant influence in our development as writers, and I wrote about you, about watching you build your platform from scratch, about how you taught me that women's stories matter at every age. Eleanor felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "That means more to me than you can know." "There's more," Lily continued, pulling an envelope from her backpack. "I know it's a little early, but I wanted to give you this now. An early Christmas present." Eleanor opened the envelope to find a handmade card featuring a photo of herself and Lily taken at Eleanor's 70th birthday celebration, before the fractures in the family had become so apparent. Inside was a simple message in Lily's distinctive handwriting: "To the woman who taught me never to disappear. Merry Christmas, Grandma." I've reserved us 2 seats at the Women in Media Awards in New York this May, where you'll be receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award. Love, Lily. Eleanor gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. What? How? I didn't even know I was nominated. That's because I nominated you, Lily explained, grinning. With help from Sophia and Marjorie. We submitted your work, your story, and testimonials from women who've been impacted by your message. The committee was unanimous in their decision. I don't know what to say, Eleanor whispered, genuinely overwhelmed. Just say you'll come to New York with me to accept it, Lily urged. It'll be my treat. Well, technically it's from the trust you set up for me, but you know what I mean. Of course I'll come, Eleanor assured her. I wouldn't miss it for the world. As they ate, Lily caught Eleanor up on her life at the University of Arizona, where she was thriving as a journalism major. She had joined the campus newspaper, made friends with shared interests, and even started dating a thoughtful young man who was studying environmental science. How are things with your parents? Eleanor asked carefully. This was always delicate territory, though less fraught than it had been in the immediate aftermath of her transformation. Lily sighed, her expression complex. Better in some ways. Still complicated in others. Mom's making an effort, I'll give her that. She actually asks about you now instead of changing the subject when your name comes up. And your dad? Dad's dad, Lily said with a small shrug. He's trying to balance everything, being supportive of me, loyal to Mom, and rebuilding his relationship with you. It's not easy for him. No, I imagine it isn't, Eleanor agreed. The relationship with Thomas had been painfully strained in the first months after Eleanor's dramatic life changes. He had been hurt, confused, and caught between his wife's resentment and his mother's newfound independence. Their weekly lunches had stopped entirely, replaced by awkward phone calls that gradually became less frequent. Rebecca's reaction had been predictably negative. She had refused to read Eleanor's blog, dismissed her growing online presence as attention-seeking behavior, and initially tried to limit Lily's contact with her grandmother, a strategy that backfired spectacularly. When Lily, with the indignation only teenagers can truly master, had pointed out the hypocrisy of trying to separate her from one of the few adults in her life who treated her as a thinking individual rather than an extension of parental expectations. The turning point had come, unexpectedly, through Eleanor's work. 3 months after launching her blog, she had been invited to speak at a women's conference in Phoenix. The topic, Reclaiming Your Voice After 70, had drawn an audience of nearly 300 women, many of whom had traveled specifically to hear Eleanor share her story. Thomas had attended, unannounced and unnoticed until Eleanor spotted him at the back of the room during her presentation. Watching his mother command the stage with confidence and grace, seeing the audience respond with tears and laughter and knowing nods of recognition, had given him a new perspective on her transformation. I didn't understand before, he had told her afterward, as they sat in the hotel lobby sharing awkward but honest conversation. I thought you were having some kind of breakdown or rebellion. But listening to you today, seeing how you're helping other women, I get it now. You're not running away from us. You're running towards something that matters to you. It wasn't instant reconciliation. There were still difficult conversations, misunderstandings, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But it was a beginning, a foundation upon which they could build a new kind of relationship based on mutual respect rather than expectation and obligation. Dad's coming to your CNN interview, by the way, Lily mentioned casually, interrupting Eleanor's thoughts. He asked me not to tell you because he didn't want to make you nervous, but I thought you should know. Eleanor smiled, touched by this gesture of support. And your mother? One step at a time, Grandma, Lily said wryly. Let's not push for miracles. After lunch, Lily helped Eleanor review the outline for her upcoming book, Refusing to Disappear, A Woman's Guide to Visibility After 60. The publisher wanted the manuscript by March, which meant intensive writing sessions balanced around Eleanor's increasingly busy speaking schedule. I still can't believe I'm writing a book, Eleanor confessed as they organized chapter notes on her dining table. At 73. Why not? Lily challenged. Laura Ingalls Wilder was 65 when she published her first book. Grandma. Moses didn't start painting seriously until she was in her 70s. Julia Child was almost 50 when her first cookbook was published. You've been studying up on late bloomers, I see, Eleanor said with amusement. Research for a profile. Piece I'm writing for the campus magazine, Lily explained. About how women often enter their most creative and productive phases later in life, once they're free from caregiving responsibilities and societal expectations. Is that what happened to me? Eleanor wondered aloud. Am I a late bloomer? You're a right-on-time bloomer, Lily corrected. You bloomed exactly when you needed to, when you were ready to claim your space and refused to be invisible anymore. After Lily left for her evening class, Eleanor returned to her blog post, inspired by their conversation about late bloomers and perfect timing. She wrote about the courage it takes to reinvent yourself when society expects you to quietly fade away. About the liberation that comes with prioritizing your own fulfillment after decades of putting others first. About finding your voice precisely when you have the wisdom and perspective to use it most effectively. As she wrote, Eleanor reflected on the profound changes the past 6 months had brought, not just in her external circumstances, but in her internal landscape. The woman who had once measured her words carefully to avoid offending her daughter-in-law now spoke her truth with compassion but without apology. The woman who had once arranged her schedule around the possibility of a family dinner invitation now traveled the country sharing her message of empowerment and visibility. The transformation had not been without cost. Some relationships had been strained, perhaps permanently altered. Her beautiful desert home, the one filled with decades of memories, now belonged to the young tech couple from California, who had sent her a kind note and photos showing the renovations they'd made to the kitchen. But the gains had far outweighed the losses. Financial independence, professional fulfillment, a platform to help other women, and most surprisingly, a new kind of relationship with Thomas and Lily, one based on authentic connection rather than obligation. Only Rebecca remained distant, though even that relationship had evolved from active hostility to a cool but civil détente. They saw each other at necessary family gatherings, exchanged polite greetings, and otherwise maintained a careful distance that suited them both for now. Eleanor finished her blog post and scheduled it to publish the following morning. As she closed her laptop, her phone chimed with another text, this one from Thomas, just heard about the Lifetime Achievement Award. So proud of you, Mom. Dinner next week to celebrate? Eleanor smiled as she replied, I'd love that. Your choice of restaurant this time. This, too, was new, Thomas initiating contact, suggesting celebrations, making space in his busy schedule for his mother not out of duty but from genuine desire to spend time with her. Small steps, but meaningful ones. Later that evening, as Eleanor prepared for bed, she caught sight of her reflection in the bathroom mirror. At 73, she made no attempt to hide the signs of aging, the silver hair, the lines around her eyes and mouth, the slight softening of her jawline. But there was something else visible now, something that had been missing before her transformation, a certain light in her eyes, a confidence set to her shoulders, an unmistakable presence that demanded acknowledgement. This was what refusing to disappear looked like. This was what standing in her truth had created, not just a successful blog or a book deal or speaking engagements, but a woman fully inhabiting her power and purpose in her 8th decade of life. Eleanor Sullivan had not disappeared as her daughter-in-law had wished. Instead, she had become more visible than ever before, to herself, to her family, and to thousands of women who recognized their own struggles in her story. And that visibility was changing lives, one blog post, one podcast episode, one speaking engagement at a time. The following Wednesday, Eleanor sat in the green room at CNN's Phoenix affiliate studio, waiting for her segment to begin. She wore a vibrant teal blouse that brought out the blue of her eyes, simple pearl earrings that had been a gift from William on their 30th anniversary, and the quiet confidence of a woman who had found her voice late in life but was using it to powerful effect. A production assistant with a clipboard appeared at the door. Mrs. Sullivan? You're on in 5 minutes. Thank you, Eleanor replied, standing to follow her to the studio. As she walked down the corridor, she caught sight of Thomas waiting near the studio entrance. He was dressed in a suit and tie, having come directly from his dental practice. No doubt, and his face brightened when he saw her. Mom, he said, stepping forward to embrace her. You look amazing. Thank you for coming, Eleanor said, genuinely touched by his presence. It means a lot to me. I wouldn't miss it, Thomas assured her. Your first national television appearance, it's a big deal. I'm a little nervous, Eleanor admitted. I've done local interviews, but this is different. You'll be wonderful, Thomas said with confidence. Just talk to them the way you talk to the women at your speaking events, with honesty and compassion. That's what makes people connect with your message. The production assistant reappeared, gesturing that it was time. Thomas squeezed Eleanor's hand. I'll be right here watching. Go show them why refusing to disappear matters. As Eleanor was led to the set, fitted with a microphone, and positioned opposite the interviewer, a polished woman in her 40s. With an interested, intelligent expression, she felt a surprising calm settle over her. This moment, like so many in the past 6 months, was part of a journey she had never anticipated but now embraced wholeheartedly. We're on in 3, 2, 1. The floor director pointed to the interviewer, who smiled warmly at the camera. We're joined today by Eleanor Sullivan, whose blog and podcast Refusing to Disappear has sparked a movement among women over 60. Eleanor, your story began with a difficult moment, overhearing your daughter-in-law wishing you would disappear from their lives. Instead of retreating, you transformed that hurt into something powerful. Tell us about that decision. Eleanor looked directly into the camera, knowing that somewhere beyond that lens were thousands of women who might recognize themselves in her story. It was a moment of painful clarity, she began, her voice steady and clear. After years of trying to be the perfect mother-in-law, undemanding, accommodating, always careful not to impose, I realized that despite my best efforts, I was still seen as an inconvenience rather than a valued family member. I had a choice. I could either accept that diminished role, gradually fading from their lives as my daughter-in-law wished, or I could transform my relationship with my family on my own terms. And that transformation involved some dramatic changes: selling your family home, starting a blog, completely reinventing your life in your 70s. Weren't you afraid? Eleanor smiled. Of course I was afraid. Change is always frightening, especially when you've spent decades in familiar patterns. But I was more afraid of the alternative, of spending my remaining years feeling invisible, unvalued, and apologetic for my existence. I decided that whatever the cost, I needed to reclaim my voice and my worth. Your message has clearly resonated with women across the country. Why do you think that is? Because invisibility isn't just my experience, it's something many women face as they age. We're expected to step back, to make ourselves smaller, to accept that our needs and desires matter less than younger generations. We're subtly and not so subtly encouraged to disappear from the main narrative of life, to be satisfied with occasional cameo appearances at holidays and special events. Eleanor leaned forward slightly, her expression intensifying. But here's the truth: the years after 60 can be the most liberated, authentic, and impactful of a woman's life. We have wisdom earned through decades of experience. We have perspective that can only come from navigating life's complexities. We have so much to contribute, to our families, to our communities, to society. Refusing to disappear isn't selfish. It's a gift to everyone around us. The interview continued for 15 minutes, covering Eleanor's blog, her upcoming book, and the workshops she had begun offering to women seeking to reclaim their visibility in their families and communities. Throughout, Eleanor spoke with the authentic passion that had drawn thousands of followers to her work, not the polished perfection of a lifelong media personality, but the genuine warmth and wisdom of a woman speaking her truth. When the segment ended and the cameras stopped rolling, the interviewer removed her microphone and reached over to shake Eleanor's hand. "That was wonderful," she said sincerely. "My mother watches this show religiously, and I know your message will resonate with her. She's been struggling since my father passed away last year, feeling sidelined in our family dynamics despite our best intentions. I'm going to send her a link to your blog." "Please do," Eleanor encouraged. "And tell her she's not alone. So many women share that experience." In the green room afterward, Thomas waited with a small bouquet of yellow roses, Eleanor's favorite. "You were magnificent," he said, presenting the flowers with a proud smile. "So articulate, so passionate. I watched the crew while you were speaking, even the cameramen were nodding along." "Thank you," Eleanor said, accepting the roses with genuine appreciation. "For the flowers and for coming today. It meant a lot to have you here." "I've been thinking," Thomas said as they walked toward the parking lot, "about what you said in the interview, about how women your age have wisdom and perspective that's valuable. You're right. And I realized I haven't been benefiting from that wisdom nearly enough lately." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.